Okay, welcome to another one of the pregnancy series workshops called Care for Birth and After. You'll notice the happy little baby face. Took me a long time to find him. Well, I knew he was there somewhere, but I found him eventually. It's a great photo. It really embodies what most women hope for through the process of becoming pregnant and giving birth. So this workshop is really some of the necessary things to understand about the birthing process itself and what to do to continue the process of recuperation for the mother after birth. Now, I have seen many clients who have had complications from the birthing process. As a lot of you have already been through other workshops and seen that there are very specific neurological modules that you can go through to train your body to support the pregnancy process from before conception all the way through the pregnancy process to the time of birth and after. If women do those modules, their recuperation after birth is a fraction of the time. Literally within 2 weeks, they are ready to go on with their life normally. Now, normally, for most women, 2 weeks is just the physical recuperation time. In other words, they tell the father, stay away from the woman for at least 2 weeks. Well, that usually doesn't happen. But if the lady goes through the modules that we have in these pregnancy series workshops, literally after 2 weeks after having given birth, she's ready to do whatever she was doing before in her life. Now, that might sound excessively short, but we know from what we've been doing with people that recuperation, being our focus, can be stimulated and activated and increased to such a degree where if the person is given the right internal or neurological circumstances, they can recuperate extremely fast and usually much better than they were doing before. It's not outside of the realms of our experience to see women recuperating completely within 2 weeks. Now, having said that, I would not go around telling people who have not done these courses that after 2 weeks you can just go and do whatever you like, because often they can't, and that's why they have come as clients. You'll remember in the during pregnancy program, there was a lot of emphasis on water, on rebalancing the water metabolism, making sure that the kidneys are operating really well. And if women really pay attention to that, their recuperation after birth really is shortened to such an amazing degree, because if they're hydrated all through the process, the hydration that they have after the birth is actually what helps them to recuperate faster. Your kidneys work with the fluids in your body and they regulate those fluids. But the kidneys need water to be able to do that. If the kidneys start to become dehydrated, which is very often the case at the end of a pregnancy, then those dehydrated kidneys really cause big problems and slow down the recuperation process for women. To the point where if those kidneys never get to be rehydrated, she never recuperates. And you hear people saying, oh, look, she's been strange ever since she gave birth to her first child. And that could have been 50 years ago. That's an indication that her kidneys never recuperated. So the modules in during birth workshop are really, really good for those people to rehydrate their kidneys and help them to recuperate from that first birth, which could have been, like I said, 50 years ago. Without proper kidney function, people can't recuperate from the pregnancy. Pregnancy is a water function. It depends on really well the processing of water in your body to be able to carry through the process. Men don't have that problem or that sort of challenge because they don't get pregnant. They have other challenges that women don't. But we're talking here about what women need to be paying attention to be able to give birth, get over the effect of that birth, and be able to be in the best position to help their baby develop and grow and so on. So this workshop is called Care for Birth, preparing the woman for the actual birthing process. So the time frame for this is just before she's ready to deliver, and after, of course, is after. And that goes on for the rest of her life at least, well, at least the rest of the child's life. So you'll discover too that some of the modules in this workshop are repeated from during pregnancy. That's because as an individual separate training, this workshop needs to have some of those modules in here to make this module or this influence more complete. So some of these you will recognise if you've done the during the pregnancy workshop, but I'll be going through them again for those people who are watching the DVD who haven't seen these modules at all. But before we get into that, there are a couple of other things that the woman needs to be aware of when she's thinking about recuperation. One of the, probably the most, I guess, focused on conditions after birth is postnatal depression. It's really quite common. It happens in most women for varying degrees of time because it's primarily hormonally based. So while the woman has been increasing her oxytocin during the pregnancy, and if she's had a well-educated and understanding partner, then there's been, as much effort as possible to take away stressful stimulants. Because the increase of stress for a pregnant woman is the enemy of the hormones that help with the birthing process. So oxytocin has been in high levels through the process. It's actually what is necessary to start the birthing process itself, actually giving birth. When a doctor or gynecologist or somebody qualified injects a woman to induce a birth, they're injecting her with oxytocin, because that's the hormone that sets off the process. But it has to be in a certain concentration. One of the problems with the birthing process is if the woman has had a lot of adrenal stress, that is an antagonist to oxytocin and keeps it down. So when she starts to go through the birthing process, if there's any distractions, even talking to her can drop the oxytocin levels and slow down the actual birthing process. For women who have never-ending contractions, but they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and the labour, as they call it, it goes on and on and on for hours and hours and hours, like sometimes 4 days. These people have already high levels of adrenal hormones in their system. And that's what's keeping the oxytocin down. The process can start, but they use up the oxytocin, and so they're squirting out bits of oxytocin, right, that help the contractions at the time, and then they run out of it and it stops. So they're starting and stopping the process all the way through. Of course they get exhausted. Even if they're running on adrenal hormones, their adrenal glands start to fail. They can't keep producing this amount of adrenaline to keep everything running. So the idea is to make sure that the whole of the birthing process is really, really calm, quiet, as fewer distractions as possible. Absolutely minimal. If there is more than 2 other people around, she's going to start to reduce her oxytocin. Her oxytocin is for one person only, and that's her baby. At that point in time, the only focus that her subconscious has is to make oxytocin so she can deliver her baby. Anything, and numbers of people included, anything more than 2 other people around is going to be a distraction and start dropping the oxytocin. Even if they say nothing, her attention is, or possibly can be distracted to those people. The fact that they move attracts her attention and drops the oxytocin. Now, obviously, there are some women whose production of oxytocin is very, very strong, very, very high, and they could give birth with a football club around them, you know, and that's happened. But generally speaking, because women are under a lot more stress generally these days, and there's a lot more effect from those adrenal hormones, the production and the maintenance of oxytocin is much more sensitive, much more delicate. So more effort has to be put into producing the environment for that oxytocin to be produced and consistently increased to the point where there's so much oxytocin, it sets off the birthing process. And there are lots of things that influence that level. Even the baby's responses at this stage influence the oxytocin levels. So there's still this big question, who starts the actual labour? Is it the mother or is it the baby? Well, the doctors with the syringe will say, it's me. And that's true, but in a natural environment, right, who does the actual initiation, mother or baby? In fact, it's a balance between the two. If she's not ready, it won't happen. If the baby's not ready, it won't happen. When they have that magic moment when they're both ready, oxytocin goes way through the roof and boom, the labour starts. And hopefully it finishes in a reasonable time. So going through these workshops gives the woman a much better chance of it going through in a reasonable time. During the process of pregnancy and birth, the woman uses up a lot of energy. A lot of energy. Probably more energy than she will in any other single event in her life. And so this creates some circumstances that make women concerned about the process, like the pain of birth, for example. But along with oxytocin, you have a whole lot of dopamine-type chemicals being produced if the right circumstances are available. And these are natural painkillers. We have the painkiller called adrenaline, but we don't want the adrenaline to be driving this process because it has detrimental effects on the function of the fetus. So what we use is the oxytocin to produce the serotonin and the dopamine and nice, what I call soft drugs, right, that you produce yourself to make yourself nice and relaxed and, you know, euphoric and, oh, the life is wonderful and, oh, I know I'm having a baby. Oh, look at that. Oh, gosh. So if we can produce lots of dopamine in the process, then the woman will go through the process of giving birth, have lots of oxytocin, and as the dopamine levels go back to normal, the other hormones will follow. But the woman doesn't stop producing oxytocin because she's going to be breastfeeding. And the breastfeeding itself is a way of stimulating the production of oxytocin. The oxytocin helps with the production of the milk, and so you have this nice closed circuit that allows the woman to feed the baby. You know, nature is just amazing in how it's set up all of these nice little systems that, you know, work well if we don't fiddle around with them. The trouble is, lots of people have taken medication, they've had lots of stress, you know, all sorts of circumstances happen in their life that they pay attention to and takes their attention away from how nature normally functions. So these the modules in this workshop are, you know, little neurological modules that you can mix and match, you can play around with, you can do them before the birth, some of them. Obviously the breastfeeding stuff comes more after birth. But these modules are there for people to apply when they have the need. And if they don't know that they have the need, they can go through these anyway, because it's a way of training the nervous system. And that's why this is one of the specific skills workshops, because the specific skills in neurotraining are neurological modules that have a certain influence on how the nervous system operates. And so in this case, we're using the effect of these modules specifically to help the woman give birth and recuperate from that birth, and be able to feed the baby in the best way. Postnatal depression is primarily a hormonal effect from the thyroid gland becoming exhausted, or at least dysfunctional for some reason. Many women, because they're stressed even before getting pregnant, because of the level of the stress hormones, those hormones tend to shut down or reduce the activity of the thyroid and the parathyroid. Now, when a woman becomes pregnant, she has to mobilize a lot more calcium to help the baby build bones and all that sort of stuff. That's done through the parathyroid hormones. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of energy goes into the parathyroid glands during pregnancy, so that the parathormone, it's called, can be in her bloodstream and move calcium around and take the calcium to the baby. There's quite a large problem with some of the concepts that are popularly held by advisors to pregnant women, and they think that dairy products, particularly milk, is a good source of calcium. Yes, it's high in calcium, but the form of calcium that the woman needs, in fact that we all need, is the ionic form of calcium, calcium ions. Now, ions don't exist all by themselves. They are made as a part of the chemical process of you digesting your foods. But the form of calcium in milk is bound very strongly. And in fact, some of the molecules of calcium in milk may actually suck up other ionic forms of calcium in your body and take calcium out of your body. Because it's such a dense calcium molecule, it's very difficult to break up. It actually takes up more energy to break it up than the energy you get from digesting it. So in the process of absorbing dairy products, there's also the secondary effect of the animal fats in the process, in the products, in the dairy products. Now, for blue-eyed women, because this is a constitutional thing and the blue eyes represent the type of constitution, they should not have dairy products. End of story. Their constitution does not match digesting dairy products. For dark-eyed women, now when I say dark, I mean genetically brown eyes, because you can have a woman that has the appearance of brown eyes, but it's just because there's so much toxicity in her system that the blue has had more toxins put over the top of it until it looks brown. That's not a true genetic brown-eyed person. That's a blue-eyed person with lots of inherited toxins. Right? So you have to be careful of that. But a naturally brown-eyed woman can actually digest animal fats a lot better than a blue-eyed woman. That doesn't mean that she should go off and drink a whole lot of cow's milk, because the fact is that after a certain amount of that cow's milk, she runs out of the enzymes needed and she's in the same situation as the blue-eyed woman. Too much dairy products creates a congestion of the lymphatic system, because the calcium and stuff, and particularly the animal fats that we can't break down, can find their ways to the tissues, and the lymphatic system cleans them up and puts them into the lymphatic system. But they coagulate in there. Literally, you've got fat, in the lymphatic system. That's part of how fat travels around your body, is through the lymphatic system. But the fat that's formed from animal products, particularly dairy products, stays in the lymphatic system a lot longer. So if the woman is continually having calcium, milk for example, thinking she's having lots of good calcium, is only congesting her system. She's possibly leaching out good calcium that is there already, and she's actually robbing the baby of calcium. The baby's not going to be getting what it needs. The best form of calcium for the woman is green plants, because the plants are already mixed with other minerals and vitamins and stuff that help her to utilise and to ionize the calcium when they're digested. Now there's one herb called comfrey, and its sort of common name is called bone knit. If you have any broken bones, you can have comfrey, and it'll fix up the bones. In fact, it'll fix the breaks stronger than the rest of the bones. Comfrey, C-O-M-F-R-E-Y. It's called Symphytum officinalis. If you want to learn Latin, Symphytum officinalis. And so for women who are obviously showing signs of calcium deficiency, a little bit of comfrey as a salad, right, just once a day, makes the strongest bones in babies that I've ever seen. It's absolutely amazing. Women absolutely need to prepare themselves for the amount of energy they're going to expend at the time of birth. That means good quality vitamins and minerals, because these days we're just not getting the vitamins and minerals out of our foods that we used to. There's been documentation and research to validate the fact that since 1975 to now, on average, the foods have lost 50% of their vitamins and minerals. 50% since 1975. Now, if you think about the whole timeline of history, right, thousands of years, and then in these little 30 years we go, zit, something's wrong. And our whole concept of how we produce our food needs to be rethought. And some of it has been rethought, and we're getting a lot more organic foods and so on. But the catch-up time is the problem. You know, we've been eating vitamin-deficient food for a long time. And everybody is vitamin and mineral deficient, unless you've been taking extra supplementation of good quality, not potency. You don't have to have higher concentrations, but you have to have good quality vitamins and minerals. And women need vitamin A in conjunction with their greens to make sure that that calcium actually can build the bones and protect the whole of the structuring process. The vitamin A has a very interesting function. It actually is the oil that we use to dissolve the bad fats. The animal fats in our body become rancid very quickly, and we use vitamin A to attach to those things and dilute them so we can take them out of our body. We can break them up. But also vitamin A then becomes an assistant to how well the calcium gets put into the bones. So having the greens and so on is a really good first step, and a lot of the greens will have some vitamin A in them anyway. But if you have the supplements of calcium or magnesium, make sure it's a calcium or magnesium citrate, because the citrate's form is much faster turned into an ion of magnesium or calcium, and so we can use that more efficiently. You're getting more of the calcium and magnesium from the supplement if it's in a citrate form. You add some vitamin A to that, and you have a really nice adjunct to the dietary input of all your nice green salads and leafy things and vegetables and whatever. The principal of our naturopathic college had this theory. He said, if it comes in a bottle or a packet, don't eat it. Well, if you think about it, If it doesn't come in a bottle or a packet, what's left? Right? Well, basically vegetables, salads. If you can chase down a cow and eat its leg or something, I suppose you could do that. But basically he was saying, just go back to natural foods. It doesn't have to be raw foods, because in some cases the rawness of the food holds in some of the nutrition that we want. Some foods need to be cooked a little bit to release, the minerals inside, particularly the more heavy ones, so we can get the full advantage of them. I don't want to turn this into a nutritional, seminar, but it's really important for women to realise that they need good nutrition through the whole process. This is because the exam of whether they've had enough is going to come when they give birth. Right? If you've had a good amount of proper nutrition all through the birth process itself is so much easier, and the people experience less pain just by having good nutrition all the way through. Remember, we did the workshop on fear. One of the biggest fears in women is the pain of the birth, particularly the first time round, because they don't know what to expect. So you have two fears. You have the fear of the unknown and the fear of the pain. All right? And, that becomes a driving force in some women. So, take them through the, being better than your fear process, because that's really important. With the fear out of the way, the adrenal hormones drop, and the other proper hormones to support pregnancy come up, and everything flows a whole lot easier. We can use the dopamines in conjunction with the oxytocin to reduce the pain. There's always going to be some pain, but you can reduce it to the point where that sum is less than, dropping something on your finger. It's like, oh, okay, oh, ouch, that hurt. Let's get on with life. Oh, there's a baby. Oh, great. Well, maybe not that simple, but, you get the idea. If the woman has been stressed and has not had the right nutrition, right, through her pregnancy, then when it comes to the birthing time, she's going to have a hard time. It's guaranteed. Unless she has the ability to produce massive amounts of dopamines and oxytocins and other hormones, if she can't do that, she's going to have a hard time with the birth. Usually the second time is easier, because the first time trains the subconscious of what hormones to produce to overcome the process. The third time seems to be easier again. And the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, they don't even think about it. They're just popping out babies when they want, If you've seen the Meaning of Life by Monty Python, where this woman has hundreds of kids, you see the picture of the stork dropping the baby down the chimney, and she's washing clothes, and bloop, oh, there's a baby. Oh, would you pick that baby up, please, dear? Thank you. And then off she goes with the other hundreds. It's a great film, you should see it. So the postnatal, I'll eventually get to this postnatal depression thing. You can avoid the postnatal depression by obviously doing the neurological modules that we have through these workshops, reducing the stress through the process, maintaining the proper nutrition for the whole of the process, so that the thyroid and the parathyroids have got an excess of energy, not a deficiency. Because if they have to work really, really hard, and they do during the pregnancy, and they don't have enough of what they need, when she's given birth, the thyroid and the parathyroid also go into recuperation mode. They shut down. So, well, we're not needed anymore, we're not making babies anymore. Time for a break. And they stop. Not completely, they slow down to the most minimum rate that they can, and the feeling of that is depression. Women have postnatal depression because of the closing down of the thyroid. Now, there's lots of ways that they've found to be able to overcome that by giving thyroid hormones. Not a good idea because it trains the hormone system to not have to make its own. They give thyroid gland supplements, which is interesting because that actually has an effect of stimulating the recuperation of the glands. Now, depending on your country, you may or may not have that available to you. In New Zealand, for example, we can get glandular extracts, but in Australia, they're forbidden because we know better. Well, in some places in Europe you can get them. In America, in some places in America you can. In other states in America, they're illegal. Who knows, you know? But anyway, you have to have a look around and see if you can get glandular extracts because they can help the thyroid and other glands a great deal. There are neurological units that you can do, and we'll probably go through, well, some of the modules that we do in this workshop are going to help the thyroid, but the workshop called Balancing Your Hormones has really got the answers for helping the thyroid and the parathyroids to get back to where they should be. You really, you know, if you have a postnatal or even prenatal depression is just a warning that postnatal depression is coming. So it's still the same problem, it's just that it's happening earlier. You're further down on the curve earlier. Now that means that the birthing process is going to be even more difficult. Prenatal depression, that means depression during pregnancy, is a warning. And you just take it as a warning, but you go for the thyroid and you help and assist the thyroid as much as you can. In the birthing process itself, the main focus here is the actual mechanics of the process. The pelvis has to open up to allow the head of the baby to come through. I often wondered when I was young, why does the baby get born head first? Surely, you know, if the woman was standing up and it came head first, it's going to fall on the ground and hit its head. You know, that doesn't make any sense. But in fact, if the head can get through, then all the rest can. And the head, in fact, is the most important part of the fetus. So if the head can get through, then the rest is going to follow anyway. But you can get an arm and a leg out, but if you can't get your head through because that's jammed up the hole, then you die. So, you know, the mechanics of giving birth is actually very interesting because the cranium of the fetus is very flexible. It's still firm, but it's like very hard cheese. Right? And as you push it, you can actually change its position. And so sometimes when the baby seems like it's not coming out, they'll stick a big pair of tongs in there and grab the head and pull the baby out. You know, we do some barbaric things to ourselves, we really do. But anyway, now in the process of that, you know, I've seen children some weeks, or in some cases some months after birth, with deformed skulls because of the pressure that was applied to their skull changed the shape of the skull bones. Now eventually that should just, you know, open up and go back to a normal shape, but sometimes it doesn't. And even if it doesn't, while they're doing that squashing of the head, they're also possibly damaging the tissue underneath. That's called brain. But there are other really important tissues in there, like the dura mater. The dura mater is a neurological entity in us that our mind, or that our brain rather, uses to know what the rest of our body is doing. And that can become damaged through those artificial processes of, you know, grabbing the child's head and pulling it out. That puts enormous strain on the neck, and the reflexes on the neck are what tells the brain where the head is on the body. They become important later for how we integrate our perceptual processes. So, you know, those sorts of mechanical assistance should at all times be avoided if possible. Caesarean births are actually much better than having a mechanically assisted birth through the canal. And, you know, I've suggested many times to women, if they've been told that they've got a small pelvis, That doesn't really matter. So long as the pelvis can open up, doesn't matter how big or small it is. All right? But the trouble is that most people who have a small pelvis also have very tight ligaments. And they're usually much more stressed people. So you see, it all starts to add up. The adrenal glands produce the mineral corticoids that stretch or loosen the ligaments. But if they've been stressed for a long time, they don't produce those mineral corticoids, the ligaments don't relax, so the little pelvis stays little and the baby can't get through. So obviously in that case, caesarean saves the baby's life and probably saves the mother's life as well. If she's put in a situation where the doctors want to do a mechanical extraction of the baby, she should ask for a caesarean instead. Because the damage that gets done to the baby anatomically repairs probably in a few days to a few weeks. But neurologically, that damage may never get repaired. It can create scarring within the baby, within the meninges of the brain, even within the brain itself. And that can be really, really difficult. And because the baby is developing neurologically at such a fast rate, right, that there are lots of things building on other things, you don't want to have something artificial placed in between that process because it's going to change the rest of the process. So I'm fully against mechanical assisted births. There are better options, and the long-term effect of those mechanical assisted births are very nasty. Even the suction, they have a suction cup, they stick it in there and they attach it to the top of the head of the baby and they suck the baby out. Well, that suction has to have a grip, and the fontanelles of the baby are open. The bones haven't come together. So they're sucking the brain up out of the cavity onto the device. Well, that's not normal. Right? The little brain is very flexible, but it doesn't like being sucked out of its position. It stretches and puts a lot of pressure on the reptilian part, the brain stem down the bottom, where it attaches to the spinal cord, and they end up with related imbalances to that part of the spinal section later on. Suction, mechanical extraction, I highly recommend you don't do it. I would recommend you did a caesarean rather than have a mechanical extraction. Obviously the ideal, and what I'd promote more, would be to set everything up so you have a natural birth, so you don't have to do any of that stuff. But caesareans these days are very efficient. They're really very good technically. And then the only thing to be concerned about is reactivating the sex reflexes on the skin for the child afterwards, because that doesn't happen with caesareans. And their reflexes on the skin that have to be that are activated naturally when the baby comes through the birth canal. The skin is pulled down enough to activate these certain reflexes in the skin. Now later on, these reflexes help the person with their sexuality, with the production of hormones, with the digestive system, and with their energy system. So if these reflexes are not activated at birth because they have a caesarean, they have to be activated later on. So that's done just by, usually with a warm, damp towel, clothes off, and just drag the towel down the body in that direction from head to feet. And that is enough to activate those reflexes, and it's amazing, what can happen as a consequence of that, especially if they don't put their clothes back on. So that's one of the things to watch for caesareans. The other thing, of course, is the recuperation of the mother. But if she's had, proper nutrition and she's been doing all of her neurological modules all the way through, she'll actually repair and recuperate from a caesarean 10 times faster than anybody else. In fact, one of our students in Sydney was going through all these processes, and she ended up having a caesarean for I don't know what reason. But 3 weeks later, she didn't even have a scar. There was just nothing, no evidence that she'd even had a caesarean. So